The next topic is by the speaker will be Architect Professor Ebelechukwu Obianuju Enwerekowe. Her topic is on pedagogical nuggets for sustainable architectural education. That is preserving the legacy, preparing for the future. Professor Ebele, you are welcome.
Thank you for the chair for that introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to stand on existing protocols so that I will be brief with my presentation. I hope the slides are up. Oh, resolution is not so great. Having to speak about design education is something that should be dear to all of us because of where we are. We are in an environment of design education. Please don't be confused by the word pedagogy. It simply means the science of teaching, and that's what we're going to look at today. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. Yes. So this is just an overview. Yes. Okay, it's clearer on this side. So we are just going to go through the overview of the paper, which will contain these key sections. Next slide, please. Architectural education is something we are all very familiar with since we're here. We know what we are doing. We are learning and training to be architects in the future. And architectural education has come a long way from the standards we used to know, where the legacy is, and there's a lot to pay attention to concerning where it is going. Architectural education has come a long way from T-squares and Z-squares. I remember somebody making that comment during one of our postgraduate seminars. He said, this is not what he expected to hear in an architectural seminar. He was thinking we were going to talk about T-square and Z-square. Unfortunately, that time has long since passed. Architecture is very diversified. We are businessmen, we are sociologists, we are accountants, we are psychologists. At a point, you are a guidance counselor. So you cannot learn architecture by learning only hard skills anymore. We've gone beyond that. And where we are focused on is taking architecture to a point where our previous speaker, Professor Alokanku, mentioned, to be sustainable for the future. How do we prepare our architects to work competently in the future? We use our pedagogy. We use our teaching methods. Architecture education, what we teach and how we teach it is a direct copy of how it is in practice. Architecture education is just exactly the way we practice, and that is how we learn. Fortunately, we have a very good guide in Nigerian education for learning. Some terms that architectural students may not be familiar with, they include the core curriculum and minimum academic standards for architectural education in Nigeria. It's known as the CCMAS. This is a document that is well researched, well compiled, and disseminated by the Nigerian Universities Commission to ensure that schools of architecture across Nigeria have some kind of uniformity. So the CCMAS contributes about 70% of our major curriculum. But then we have schools of Nigeria. I'm not too sure the current number, but there are well over 50 schools of architecture across Nigeria. So the CCMAS allows individual schools to have their own content, some philosophies that guide your school's thinking, because some schools are more technical. You know, you might have heard of Federal University of Technology, Federal University of this, University of that. So each university has its own ideologies and philosophies, and they contribute 30% to the CCMAS, which is taught across Nigerian schools. So to look at this paper, the two key questions that will be asked will be, how sufficient is the CC for architectural education? Is the CC working? Is it going to work? Does it take into consideration the dynamics of architectural education, which affects our practice? We also need to look at the question as in how effectively can the CC and our architectural pedagogical strategies work for combining our legacy as in architectural education. We come from a very strong legacy in architectural education, but how does it combine with the future, which are our innovations and sustainable means? Next slide, please. So architectural education, next slide. Architectural education comes from a tradition of self-learning as well as mentored learning. Some of you may have heard the term a meister or a mentor or a maestro. Before architectural education became formalized at the end of the 19th century, we had a situation where there was nobody going to school to study architecture. You would just have an experienced builder, someone who has learned all the tricks of the trades. Sometimes they were masons, they were carpenters, depending on the materials of construction that were available. And that meister will take on a young mentee, take on a protege, and will teach you over years and years of experience. There was no duration for that. You could learn it in 1 month, you could learn it in 50 years. So you're only released from the training when your master or your maester thinks you are ready. So I'm sure, coming from this our African context of learning, I'm sure that you know that many trades are learned under a mentorship scheme like that. For traders, carpenters, and so on and so forth. You see them doing that. And architecture came from that. But sometime at the turn of the 19th century, the decision was that architecture should go formal. So you go to schools to learn it. And in those schools of architecture, the pedagogy being used involves not just learning under a master or a mentor, but it also involves a lot of self-learning and individualism. This method of learning sometimes asks the question, is architectural education governed by pedagogy or something we call andragogy, which is this matured learning kind of school? Adult education is what we call andragogy. Or are we looking at heutagogy, which is self-learning? You just throw the student into a situation where he's forced to learn by himself. Well, what we find out is that architectural education involves a little bit of everything. There is a meister, there is a mentor who will guide you. I'm sure some of you who have gotten to your second year, if you are here, you have started doing design studio courses. So you have architectural mentors in your studio, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, under whose mentorship you are being guided. But then you also keep learning. Architecture is one of those professions that you never stop learning. Especially now, you heard us have a long talk on sustainability. We've had another talk on AI. If you don't learn constantly, you will be left behind. And architectural education does not stop once you leave your institution of learning. You will constantly find areas where you have to adapt. Is it working? Okay, there we go. So we have this issue where we are constantly adapting and learning and getting prepared to face future challenges. So there is a bit of andragogy. There is a bit of self-learning, which is the heutagogy. You find out that, especially in the Nigerian standards of education, you are given a period of learning in architectural education in which you, the student, are responsible for self-learning. You will teach yourself. You are given design briefs, and you are expected to come up with ideas of your own. I recently got to find out, maybe this is well-known information, but I got to find out quite recently that in a lot of countries, especially developed, so-called Western countries, developed countries, when you're going in for your research thesis, or you're at research for any level, undergraduate, postgraduate, your topic is given to you by a supervisor. You don't pick your own topic. So you are told what to write on. And I was explaining this to a researcher in another country, that in my country, we don't give students research topics. We say, go and pick your topic and bring it, and we'll take a look at it. And if it is worth researching, you are assigned a supervisor. So there's a lot of self-learning in the Nigerian curriculum of education. And this is something that is very readily available in the CC document. What we know is that architectural education does involve a tradition of creative freedom and expression to address real-world problems in the built environment with all tools of critical thinking. Next slide, please. In summary for architectural education, we know that pedagogy, as we are trying to describe it, involves three key aspects. We're looking at the teaching methods and the techniques to teach. We're looking at the students' learning behavior, and we're also looking at the teaching tools for dissemination. These are the three aspects that pedagogy covers. Given the time frame for this presentation, it probably won't be possible to discuss all the aspects in detail, because the aspect of teaching methods and teaching techniques will involve a very close look at the individuals who are asked to teach architectural education in Nigeria. But I'm sure you know in this setting that what the NUC requirements are is that anybody teaching architecture is already trained and licensed, or trained and qualified to teach. You cannot teach in an architectural program if you are not an architect, which means you must have been trained yourself. For the student learning behavior, there are a lot of information out there about student learning styles, learning behavior, how students learn. But once again, we assume that for you to have been part of the architectural program in Nigeria, you already meet certain intelligence and creative skills to be qualified to even study architecture in the first place. So that is something that is general to the system. But this particular presentation looks a little bit more about the teaching tools for dissemination, which are contained in the CCMAS document that we have. Next slide, please. For the purpose of collecting data for this study, next slide, the main information was gathered through a lot of research, studies of existing papers and reports. I have done some research myself in recent time on student learning behavior and understanding the pedagogies that are being used in Nigerian architectural education, because there is a concern, a rising concern, that some of the graduates of architectural programs are not ready for real-world problems. At the third year or fourth year in most schools of architecture, students now go out for industrial attachment, which is a 6-month hands-on learning exercise program where they actually work in an architectural practice. And they get to work, and as academics, we get the feedback from those who have employed you for 6 months. It usually comes back with very mixed reviews. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they feel that as architectural educators, we have a lot of work to do to help the students prepare for real-world problems. But when we take a closer look at this, you find out that in the context of work that is out there, there is enough information in the CCMAS document, as well as the existing research out there. Information is growing, we are gathering it, and therefore the information presented here will be more like a mixed method, some kind of quantitative, a hybrid between quantitative and qualitative data for presentation. So on the next slide, I know the resolution may not be so great, but I think the slides of this presentation will be made available after the presentation. We have some researchers, both internal, that is within Nigeria, and external, internationally, who have looked at architectural education in terms of modules. What we teach in architectural education is a studio-based program. All of our non-studio-based programs have direct impact on studio learning. And that studio learning is where the architect learns. That is a simulation of the architectural practice you will do outside of your learning environment. So we have this matrix of sorts that gives us a cross-reference between the CCMAS content and the modules we have for architectural training, which are in 12 themes. And these themes include physical model making, creativity stimuli, critiques, dialogue, student learning styles, experiential learning, collaborative work, participatory stakeholder meetings, problem-based learning, digital design, immersive technology, and pedagogical strategies. Now, what we have found out is that the modules from architectural education as given by the CCMAS, which include art and drawing, architectural history and theory, building systems and technology, humanities and social studies, environmental control, and physical sciences and ICT. What we have learned from the cross-reference between the 12 modules of, the 7 modules of architectural education and the 12 themes is that the CCMAS document actually provides a very robust content for sustainable architectural education delivery. And I think that is something that we should applaud, because as a document that is constantly being revised, you can be sure that the contents of the CCMAS curriculum, which is shared to schools of architecture, is sufficient for sustainable architectural training. Whether you're working here in Nigeria or you don't know where you'll find yourself in the future, you could be anywhere in the world. The content of the CCMAS is extremely robust. The challenges we have in looking at the CCMAS, which are on the next slide. Can we move to the next slide? The challenges of the CCMAS as have been looked at in a global context when compared to countries around the world, because on this slide we have a ranking with Nigeria, schools in Asia, schools in US and Canada, schools in the UK, and of course the rest of Africa. There's a ranking system based on some existing study to show that one area where Nigerian schools still seem to show a little bit of or a need for improvement include areas such as ICT. We have some challenges with some of the theoretical and structural courses like business, psychology, and other social sciences. There is that need to continue to enhance the curriculum to improve those areas. But as I did say at the beginning, the CCMAS only provides 70% of the core curriculum content. Institutions are responsible for providing 30%. And this is where the individual schools can take a good hard look at what to add to the curriculum on an individual school basis so that the students get the best. For those of us sitting down here and for those that are watching around the world, University of Jos has submitted its 30% addition to the CCMAS curriculum, and it was very robust. It has courses on business, courses on psychology, courses on landscaping and gardening, courses on housing studies. All of these are designed to enhance what our students learn so that their education is extremely diverse. In the course content I teach as an undergraduate course, I'm sure you've heard, my students will hear me say many times that an architect is expected to know a little bit about everything. And that is a mantra that drives the diversity of the profession. You don't know where you'll find yourself, you don't know what context you'll find yourself, but as a ranking on a global scale, Nigerian education for architecture is in good standing, and I think that is something that should be encouraged. But as I said, because of the areas of ICT and research, where there are some challenges, you find out that we are spending more time in architectural education working on the hard skill sets, hard skills. And with the talk on AI just having concluded, it's something that needs to be given a very critical look on how to cope with the development of hard and soft skills. There's a university, I think the next slide will help me with this. There is a university in the United States of America called the University of Maine that developed this prototype housing called the BioHome 3D. Some of you may have heard of it. I wish the pictures could have been a little bit clearer. But this building achieved a lot of milestones, broke a lot of records following some recent development in the United States. The first thing is that it's a prototype developed entirely out of academic research, one of the first of that. And one of the things about the BioHome 3D is the method of construction and the materials of construction that were used. Looking at this, you would not believe that this is a house where the external and internal, including furniture, are all made of waste, wood waste. And what happened is that everything is pulverized, turned into a paste, and used with a polymer, a plastic polymer, and turned into a prefabricated home. And this building has now not only achieved LEED status, has been ranked for a LEED ranking, it also has been the first prefabricated home to survive under all weather extremities. So no matter how cold or how hot the weather is, this building is standing very solid. And this is a product of academic research. It wasn't funded by a corporate body or some kind of a business person. It is purely from a school of architecture. What stops schools of architecture around the world from coming up with more innovation for housing delivery and providing affordable housing? If the curriculum is robust enough, and if the information that is being shared to our students is relevant enough, this is the kind of research that should come out of schools of architecture from anywhere in the world. After all, Nigeria is, if nothing else, we are gifted in generating waste. We have a lot of it. Plastic waste, wood waste, even human being waste is available. So whatever it is, we should be able to turn our waste into treasure by coming up with affordable homes. Next slide, please. Concerning the pedagogical approaches for architectural education, we take a good look at the best approaches, which include the constructivist approach, the collaborative approach, integrative learning, and the reflective approach, as well as inquiry-based learning. This study acknowledges the fact that for everybody who teaches in architecture, it's a very highly selective career choice for anybody. Just like law, medicine, and other professional courses, you must have a certain level of competence to be able to teach in architectural education. And one of the things that is highly needed, as based on the requirements of the NUC and the CCMAS curriculum, is that every school of architecture is composed of a suitable mix of educators of different levels of competence. There's a high need for the junior cadre educators. We need mid-level educators, and we also need senior level educators, because they all bring something different to the program. Most junior level educators are the ones that come with all the innovation and the smart ideas and the new things. I think the last speaker mentioned that not everybody with gray hair will easily adapt to AI, but there's a level of adventure and level of experimentation that will come from the early level educators. The mid-level educators will also bring through creative thinking, through experimentation, and through challenging the student learners. And the senior cadre educators are needed to provide experienced critical thinking skills. Once again, I will stand on a positive note by saying that this is something that the requirements of architectural education in Nigeria make very clear, that it is expected that all schools of architecture have a good distribution of staff who bring different things to the table to be sure that our students learn in the best possible way. Next slide, please. One thing that is very certain is that architectural education will look very different today than it did 200 years ago, or over 100 years ago. Our studios before used to be very manual, very analog. I'm sure if I'm to ask half of the students here if they have ever seen the old-fashioned drafting machine with the wire-driven T-square, Z-square that rolls around the drawing board, some people will think we are talking about magic. But the drawing studios of now do not look like that. Some of the pictures that are shown in the slide there show the architect almost lying on the drawing board to draw and reach the top corners of his A0 sheets. Nowadays, we have all sorts of drafting tools, mechanical tools, electrical tools, digital tools, to help us bring the design studio to where we are. It's quite unfortunate that some of the pictures of our own studios in our Nigerian schools of architecture are not so encouraging. We are still very manual in a lot of levels, which has its advantages and disadvantages. But definitely to be able to meet up with global standards and to be sure that our architects are properly equipped for the future, there is a need to teach ourselves how to have or how to work in effective design studios. We have the influence of the learning process. We need to create teacher-centered learning spaces as well as student learning, independent student-centered learning spaces, so that students learn how to conceptualize. That's the only way we are going to run away from the challenges of AI. we are all worried about where we are going to be in the future with the robots and the taking over the world saga. Some of us have been watching Terminator movies since we were in primary school. We saw what happens when robots go crazy, and we don't want them to get to that point. So we have to stay one step ahead of them and make sure that we keep our attraction to technology within a manageable zone. But technology is here, and we must embrace it because it is going to help us get through a lot of our automated tasks of drafting and drawing and presenting. Next slide, please. I wish, once again, this is another picture that I wish would have come out clearly, but I've shared this with some of my students in class. I consider myself a bit of a meme queen. So these are pictures I've gotten off the internet. And you can see the first picture on the left, we have a helicopter pilot and a cameraman trying to capture images of where the picture was taken from was a forest fire in Los Angeles. And you can see the cameraman hovering out of the camera in 2009. Fast forward to 2019, and we have a drone that can do the exact same thing. And that picture is captioned, in the last 10 years, both the cameraman and the pilot have just lost their jobs. Upgrade yourself. The picture on the right, which I wish to had also been a little bit clearer, shows engineering students, and they're holding a site plan, trying to set out on site. And if the picture had been clearer, you will see that the drawing of the house there is nothing technical. It looks like this primary school drawing of a house to show you that the drawing is not complete. And that picture is captured engineering students who studied online in 2020. So what we have is a balance where we have to learn to understand our traditions of architectural education. The skills that are taught include both soft skills and hard skills. We have to learn to think, we have to learn to innovate, we have to learn to solve problems, and we have to learn how to present these solutions to our clients in a way that they will make sense and they will be affordable. But at the same time, we need to embrace the technologies that are out there to make our work seamless, effective, and make an impact in the present-day societies we are going to find ourselves. We are not working to practice in the past. We have a legacy of architectural training and a legacy of architectural practice, but at the same time, we are forward-looking and thinking of how to impact the future as we go ahead in this architectural journey. Next slide just has a few references, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Prof. We just had a very important presentation, and this topic is very sensitive to us. In fact, this topic is very close to us because it's talking about architectural education, and we are in a university where we learn architecture. And architecture has come a long way, even since before the Bauhaus. There were architects, and there were different methods of teaching, you know, and just not too far away. I remember when we were students, we were analog. We'll be in the studio 24 hours. Some of us have developed hunchbacks because at that time, we are doing manual, all our drawings are manual. I hope, Architect Stephen, I hope you are not going far, because you will be the next person to present. So, I would like you to, okay, since the next speaker is not around, I will allow questions. I will allow questions on this, the last, Architect Alu. Is he going? Okay. Okay, so you're back. I was saying I would like questions on the last presentation, or comments or contributions, please. I expect questions from the staff and the students, because this topic is our own. It's very close to us. Especially, we need people to contribute, to make comments on this topic. Hello? We have, I can see we have some PhD students who are preparing to write their thesis. This floor is also for you, at least to prepare you for writing of your thesis. Okay. So since there's no question,
Hello.
I will call.
Hello.
Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. Yeah, my name is Obianuju. If I should come forward.
Come this way.
Okay, my name is Obianuju. So my question was to the topic about AI, where we're speaking about that architects will not lose their jobs, and the idea that AI helps us compress time, and has actually it has become integrated in our work. So I'm now asking that, given that AI compresses time, where you have to work on a project for 8 months, you have a team of say 30 people working on a project, but now you can go up to a month. It now means that you don't need 30 people on a project. You need like 10 people. So what happens to the 20 people that get let off on that project? So doesn't that equate to losing their jobs? Then also the conversation about misinformation that AI brings, I do think that given the current stage, because when we're talking about AI, we're talking about just the current stage. We have not looked at, and when you compare AI 2 years ago and AI right now, you find that it's more, say, informed on the things you feed it. So if you go into another 10 years with that feeding of information, then you're looking at the fact that AI becomes something else, entirely different from what it is now. So now my question now goes to the fact that how are we preparing ourselves to actually be very relevant even at that time? Then the other part now also goes to the pedagogy of it, is that how can we really implement these things? Because I think with what Professor Zamzam sort of like said about some of these things taking over, because it's out of our power when you find out, say, the global north are engaged in these things, and we here are just merely just having conversations about them, because I've seen firsthand where projects have been done entirely, projects that you would have let go of, but because you have a tool that can actually speed that thing up for you, then your client is actually happy at the end of the day. So those things are being used. So we are at this end of the world now that we don't have these tools readily available for us, and that we are not engaging in the pedagogy of them. How can we start to incorporate them and actually become sustainable in our education and in our own workflow? I think it seems a lot, but that's my questions.
I think if I if I get what you're saying, is that you were saying how with artificial intelligence,
Yes.
How could we, as architects, learn and practice architecture? Or
Okay, the first part was about the loss of jobs. The second part was about if we say I can agree that AI gives misinformation today, but that conversation might not be tomorrow because they become very informed. So it now becomes, how can we really integrate these things in our own workflow ethically and actually be up to standard in the globalized world right now?
Okay. Yeah, you want to respond? Okay. Let's have the mic.
So the first question was on loss of jobs. And I think that is a genuine concern. The practical example you gave, which is tasks that before would have taken a team of 20, 30 architects, can now be taken by 3 architects and a good laptop. And you're wondering how that will affect job market in the future. Well, I wish Professor Awa was still sitting here to try to allay a little bit more fears about whether architects will get jobs. But what they keep telling us is that AI works with algorithms, and algorithms come from input. And input obviously comes from humans. So I think our focus will now be spent on what we are working on the AI, the information the AI is using, which is the soft skill, the thinking power, the development of the ideas, and the AI only patterns them together. That's what algorithms do. They pull them all together. My concern about some of those AI questions, in fairness, may stem from some of the things we've seen with, I don't want to call it an AI tool, but with algorithm tools like Wikipedia, for example. Wikipedia was also created a very brilliant idea. People can put information out there and you can access it very easily. So it's like an online or a virtual encyclopedia. But we all know that one of the problems with Wikipedia with time is that it can be edited and adjusted by even somebody who knows nothing about the topic. So a 5-year-old can go onto Wikipedia and change my name from Ebelechukwu Enwerekowe and make me somebody else. I will start posting things, and it is left for me to either discern what is right and what is wrong. And I think that's in the case of the ethical use of AI. What is probably going to happen, or where I see AI going from my own perspective, is that anything you generate with AI, you fact check and you verify. Because AI is a product of machine learning. Machine learning is the system, the algorithms learning from what we have told them. If we tell them the wrong thing, they will keep permutating the wrong thing. That's as simple as it's going to work. So we need to make sure that what we are feeding the machine learning with is factual information. And I'll give you a practical example. A few weeks ago, we were having a conversation on one of our WhatsApp platforms, and someone started tinkering with AI, and all of a sudden the question moved to Southwestern architecture. I think somebody must have asked Meta, can you give us some examples of Southwestern architecture? And started buildings, images started popping up on the platform, and it became clear that those were not Southwestern. Anybody who has lived in the Southwest or has done something on Southwestern architecture will know that it's not true. Those are not South. In fact, another person commented and said, these are clearly South American buildings. The AI is not getting it right. It's moving towards Mayan architecture, architecture of what do you call these? The Aztecs. That's not Southwestern architecture. So it's a question of garbage in and garbage out. If we teach our machine learning the wrong thing, then it's going to throw us off course. So the only way you can use it ethically and correctly is that know that the AI generated information is a guide. It's a template. It's a tool. Before you use it, verify or fact check. From a point of, as an architecture editor, we sometimes, I don't want to point fingers or name names, but we sometimes see students using a lot of AI-generated information for assignments. And one of the first things you can catch, whether it is fact or not, is when you fact check any of the references. Most of the time, the AI will give you a bunch of bogus references. There are now AI tools that will help you counteract that and will give you, so it's constantly evolving based on what we are imputing. So if we impute rubbish, we're going to get rubbish. And because the machine learning constantly adapts to the information, if we don't fact check and do the research, the manual, the physical fact checking, then we'll probably be led astray. But Will the AI help us to do our jobs faster and more efficiently? That's what it's supposed to do. Is it going to reduce the teams of working in drastic number? It probably will, but yes, you upgrade yourself and you know how you are going to work. And as architects, know that one of the things we contribute to the society is an important need for man's survival, which is constantly expanding. The need for home. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter building. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter home. As long as people still have our minds, we pray that we don't lose our minds. But as long as we have our minds, we have individual needs that require individual solutions. And that's probably all I can say. It might not allay your fears. If you don't learn, if you don't evolve, you will be left behind. There is no place in the practice for anybody who is not ready to move forward. But the clear example of the use of drafting tools, the CAD we use, when CAD came out decades ago, almost like 2 decades ago, I remember people were afraid that if there is a drafting tool on the computer, will architects no longer draw? We've been using CAD for more than 20 years. We are still drawing, we are still designing. It doesn't, in fact, there are now CAD drafting tools that will allow you use coordinate as drafting tools. So AI is not meant to make you afraid that you don't have a job. It's just something you have to evolve and adapt to using to make you better. If that helps. I mean, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Another question there. Another comment.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question, can you all hear me? I'm just adding my contributions to what has been said. I'm very excited today, especially the last presentation. I'm seeing that the future is bright for architects. I remember my BSc thesis asked the question, why architects don't write specifications? I went in depth. I didn't even find a lot of research in that field. And I'm seeing CCMA solving some of these problems. They're allowing schools of architecture look at the problems that they are seeing and then providing solutions. And I'm seeing architects learning the business part of architecture. I'm seeing architects learning innovation. I'm seeing architects learning how to do proper working drawings, how to write technically, how to do a lot of things that we didn't know how to do. And I'm so glad that we are not so far behind from what it should be. Let's see.
Okay, thank you very much for that contribution. Thank you very much. The last speaker has really presented a paper on architectural education.